Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. Today is Friday, the 14th of January 2022. It's the end of the week, but we have a lot of stories to discuss with you. And let's begin with the leading story, that is the national security policy, whose public version was unveiled by Prime Minister Imran Khan today in a ceremony. This public version is more or less around 50 pages long, has around 7 chapters, and talks about different issues, whether it be national security framework, national cohesion, securing our economic future, defense and territorial integrity, internal security and foreign policy in a changing world. This is going to be our first segment of the day. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the United Nations chief, Antonio Guterres, who has warned that millions of Afghans are on the verge of death. This is what he says. He has also said that the international community should fund the United Nations $5 billion humanitarian appeal. This is an appeal that was made very recently by the United Nations, and also release Afghans' frozen assets and jumpstart the banking system in Afghanistan to avert economic and social collapse. And we all know where Afghanistan is going if the money and aid does not reach in time. This is going to be our second story of the day. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk about Syria. Then that on Wednesday, that is the day before yesterday, has joined the China's proposed Belt and Road Initiative. This is going to help this Middle Eastern country, as far as the different reports go, to create new opportunities for cooperation with China and other countries. And also, this is also an extension and a more further strengthening of the BRI, of which the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is also a very important part. Then we'll talk about the Duke of York, whose military titles and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. Prince Andrew, 61, has been, of course, there is an allegation of rape on him on different incidents by a lady, and that is why most of his titles have now been returned to the Queen. He also faces a US civil action over these sexual assault allegations, which he, of course, denies. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk about the World Report 2022 that has been released by the Human Rights Watch, that calls on increasingly repressive and violent acts against civilian protests by autocratic leaders and military regimes across the world. It criticizes many countries that include the United States, France, Germany, and of course India as well, for the way it has been treating its minorities. This is going to be our last story of the day. Let's begin with our first story, ladies and gentlemen, our first segment, that concerns the national security policy that was unveiled today. The public version of it, at least, was unveiled today by Prime Minister Imran Khan. The public version is around 50 pages long. The conclusion is page 48, so of course more or less 50 pages. 7 important chapters on it, very important topics that are discussed during it. More in the following report.
Navigating internal and external security challenges of a country requires comprehensive, inclusive, and updated national security framework. Inculcating new dimensions of security in its policy framework, Premier Imran Khan launched the public version of country's first ever national security policy, whereby economic diplomacy and human security are core ingredients of this multi-pronged strategy. The landmark 5-year NSP policy document was approved during the 36th meeting of the National Security Committee. The new Citizen-Centric security vision seeks a shift in Pakistan's approach from geostrategic to geoeconomics, while finding confluence of the economic, climate, and social domain with the larger national security paradigm. To unleash inclusive growth and economic potential of a country, structural and policy reforms are required to usher peace, development partnerships, and connectivity, as envisioned by national security policy. The emphasis upon symbiotic relationship between human security, economic security, and military security with the prosperity and safety of citizens underlines seismic shift in country's national security apparatus. Moreover, Pakistan, as a frontline state in global war on terror, has contributed relentlessly in counter-terrorism efforts in its bid to ensure regional peace and stability, and the sacrifices have continued even till now. Adopting integrated approach to holistic security policy making to counter both traditional and non-traditional security threats is part of Pakistan's ceaseless efforts for regional peace. To better endure the changing tides of 21st century, Pakistan took years to formulate the umbrella document in which all stakeholders and institutions were on board.
Now, to discuss more about this national security policy, that is, of course, for a period of 4 years, it's going to be renewed every year as well. We've been joined by Brigadier Amjad Ali Saab, who is a security analyst. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Brigadier Saab, how important is it for a country like Pakistan to have a national security policy?
Thank you very much, Bart. This is very important, and this is not only important for this country, this is important for every country. And after good about 7 decades, finally we have got this document, and this document basically is a mother document from where all the policies they flow. For example, if you make the defense policy, you make food security policy, you make human security policy, you make environmental policy, cohesion policy, whatever blah blah is there, those policies which are to be made. This is supposed to be mother document which necessarily describes your prime interest, national objectives, and how to achieve those objectives, and how to go about to achieve those aims, national aims, which have been set for that particular time period. None of the country which exists in the prevailing environment, which exists without the national security policy. And it is not only about the physical security of the people of Pakistan or of any nation state. It is about every aspect, all the departments, all the ministries which are working, all the government systems, they literally hinge upon this security, which was missing for 2-3 reasons. Number one was, of course, the vested interest of the people, because when the policy is described, that becomes a document which, you know, it can't be challenged anywhere, because that is basically the policy of that very country. It concerns your neighbors. So therefore, there were economic interests, there were business interests, because of which these policies were not made. And people have been avoiding to make. And this is the major step which this government has taken under the leadership of Prime Minister.
Now, Prime Minister Imran Khan also said today, when he launched this public version of the national security policy, he said, and I quote, that the country never had a plan to secure itself economically. Why was that not? Why was a country like Pakistan not secured economically in the past?
There is a reason for that, because if you just turn over the pages of history, you will come to know that most of the time of this country, especially after era of 50, 52, most of the portion of the economy was based on the under the carpet economy of this country. And this was not only in this country, it is with every third world country. Your country in third world, when it is a third world country, it is a developing country or it is underdeveloped country, they need to have the black economy. And till the time that black economy, you call it, or under the carpet economy, which is hidden somewhere in the country, and with a lot of inflation, there exist the people who still run the country with the economic, if not fragile, I must say, or with not that much of the economic strength. Therefore, the economic security policy was somehow or the other avoided, and was always have been avoided because of the reasons that those people who are at the helm of affair, they might be exposed. So therefore, this policy they have been avoiding. But where was the mother document at that time? And that mother document was the national security policy. That vision which was to be given by the executive, by the chief executive of this country, or the head of the government, or the one who is running the state. Till the time, nobody can make the policy. So therefore, that they have been avoiding this somehow or the other, which should have been made.
Moeed Yusuf Saab also today said during the inauguration ceremony, he said that there are very few countries that have codified policies like the ones Pakistan has crafted of late. He also said that part of this policy, that is the 50 of the 100 pages, have been released to apprise the world of their salient features. How important is it in your point of view, A, to codify policies, and B, to apprise the world that Pakistan is moving in the right direction?
This is very important because you are an atomic power. You are presently, you are a growing economic power, you are an atomic power, you are the entire world focuses on you, especially with the emerging of the new blocks in the world. With the new world order, I must say, the people are focusing on you. So therefore, you needed to have this policy, and this was the need of the time. And this has to be codified.
All right. Now there are chapters in this 50 pages that we have gotten our hands on national cohesion, on economy, defense, internal security, foreign policy, and human security. All of these are extremely important. How important is also the timely application in real life of all of these principles that have been put forward?
Till the time a thing which has been put on paper or theoretically it is taught or learnt or it has been documented, till the time it is not implemented and till the time its practical manifestation is not, it is unfolded, there is no use of this document. It is very important. Now this is the job of all the departments, this is the job of all those security agencies, this is the job of all the ministries to make their policies. They have been given the guideline in this national security policy, and till the time that has not been implemented, it is useless.
And a very important aspect, Brigadier Saab, of this policy is the foreign policy. Now, in this chapter, which is of course concentrated on the foreign policy, there is a lot of talk on economic diplomacy, listing peace in the region as a top priority. When we know we have a neighbor that is quite aggressive like India, how do we deal with it while remaining in the parameters that have been put in the national security policy?
Look, but we have been doing it without, in the absence of even this document, they have been doing it. So when this document has come up now with a lot of thought processes, with a lot of, concerns, with a lot of input from the different departments over a period of 70 years, I must say. But serious working, I am sure, had started 3-4 years back on this document. Now it is very important, and it will be very easy to handle all these powers who are against Pakistan, or aggressors, you must say, or may I say it, are enemies, whatever we assume out of them. They'll have to be on track hereafter when they have come to know that this country has a policy now, and that policy which has been told at international level, and even at international level the people understand that this very thing is policy of a sovereign state.
Of course.
It is Pakistan.
Now you talk of sovereign state, there's another point, and that is that Pakistan desires not to become part of bloc politics. Now in a global scenario or a regional scenario, when bloc politics become a very inherent part, how can Pakistan survive being neutral?
Can't be. How can we be neutral? There are 2-3 major reasons. The first and the most important reason is your geostrategic location in this region, not even in this region, and in this very important region. 7.5 billion population of the world. Out of 7.5 billion population of the world, more than 3 to 4 billion people, they live in this region, where you have a very, very important geostrategic position. How can you delineate yourself from others? How can you delineate from the politics, regional or the international politics?
All right. There's also the defense part, in which something that we've already talked about in different shows, the hybrid war, and how to take care of that. We know how the hybrid war has been affecting Pakistan, especially from our not so friendly neighbor, that is India. And of course, the threats to cybersecurity, we've also had those. We've also talked about those as well in the past. How strong, in your point of view, is Pakistan as far as facing these challenges, that is cybersecurity and hybrid warfare?
It's not me who will say this. Military thinkers at the world level, professors at the world level in different universities. One of the professors, I've forgotten his name, he said in one of his speech in Harvard, he said that literally Pakistan has been converted into unsurmountable fortress. Now when you say unsurmountable fortress, it means it is, you now cannot attack and occupy this very land. How, on which basis? It is necessarily your defense. Whereas your defense policy necessarily hinges on the defensive offensive policy. Still, you are very strong in your cyber systems. You have gone very strong in your cyber. You are very strong nuclear power. You are a very strong military power. You have state-of-the-art, well-trained, battle-hardened armed forces. That is the base of all the policy. Till the time you are protected, your borders are protected from internal and external threat. How can you implement those policies which ultimately affect the nation? And this nation will be affected by the food security or human rights. You take the environmental systems, you take other cohesions of the nation, or whatever you say. It will never be possible till the time you are externally and internally well protected. meaning thereby that your defense policy has to be robust, and it is already. Now you have the basic document. Now when you have the basic document, you precisely understand the mind of that prime institution, call it the parliament, where the representative of this nation are sitting. Whatever they think, that has been jotted down. The security advisor Mohit Pirzada Sahab Yusuf Mohit Sahab has already verbatim he has said it, that this has to be the parameters from which we will operate hereafter.
All right. Now, when we come to securing our economic future, and I think this is a very important component of this national security policy, our Premier has said time and again that we need to increase our exports. We need to be export-based country, and if we do not increase our exports, we are going to be in a state where we might have to go again to the IMF. How important is it to not only secure our economy but also to increase our exports?
While this is, I'll tell you a phrase, you need to be firm while being polite. You need to exercise now this very dictum here, that you need to be a security conscious, or you need to have your economic policies and import and export secure, while you need to export more and import less. And that is only possible if your economic policy, basing on the national security policy, is a very strong in the quantified terms. It is given to those who are at the helm of affair and they deal with the economy, are those people of this nation who are really are the linchpins in enhancing the economy of this country.
All right. And finally, when we talk of the policy guidelines that have been given under all of these chapters, whether it be the national security network, national cohesion, securing our economic future, defense and territorial integrity, internal security, foreign policy in a changing world, and human security as well. These are all very important aspects of Pakistan's security that Pakistan needs to safeguard in all forms and manifestations. Now, when we also see that this is a 4-year policy and it's going to be reviewed at the end of each year, do you feel that an implementation, a robust implementation, needs to be put now that this policy has been implemented and has been given to the public and has also been approved by the cabinet?
Yes, there is a need. Then these, whatever you have said, that these are the elements of national power. The elements of the national power with the passage of time or with the passing time, they change their dynamics. Whenever they change their dynamics, you need to have another policy. And when it comes to the element of national power, population is one of it. The youth to old ratio is another. Your growth is another. Your export quality capabilities, yet another element of the national power. Whenever there will be a change in the national power, elements of the national power, you need to change the policy. However, how to get it implemented in true letter and spirit, that is only possible that if a foot is put down right now by the government and all the departments of the government, that this is the policy, this has to be followed religiously till the time we will not do it. With the passage of time, with the sensitization of the people, inshallah, this will be implemented.
Inshallah, we really hope so. Thank you very much, Brigadier Amjad Ali Saab, Senior Analyst, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this national security policy that has been unveiled today by Prime Minister Imran Khan. Of course, a part of that has been made public. The rest is not for public consumption. Nevertheless, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the National Security Policy 2026. This is Pakistan's first national security policy document, and it seeks to co-locate Pakistan in the emerging global trends and identify policy objectives and priority areas where Pakistan should invest its national resources to ensure the most beneficial outcomes. Let's go to our second segment, and before that, thank you very much, Brigadier Saab, to have joined us for the first segment. Let's go to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Afghanistan and the dire humanitarian and economic conditions through which the people in our neighboring country are going through. This has been reiterated time and again by Pakistan, has also been reiterated time and again by the United Nations. They have pledged $5 billion and have asked the different world countries to donate these $5 billion for immediate aid, almost $5 billion. And now Antonio Guterres also says that millions of Afghans are on the verge of death until and unless the aid does not reach them. More in the following report.
Millions of Afghans are struggling to survive after crucial foreign aid was halted due to the Taliban's takeover. Afghanistan is contending with the upheaval caused by the current political transition, frozen foreign reserves, collapsing public finances, increasing pressure on the banking system, and rising poverty. Full-blown humanitarian catastrophe looms over Afghanistan. According to the World Food Programme, only 2% of Afghans are getting adequate food, with over 3 million children are suffering from malnutrition. If conditions don't improve, the Food and Agriculture Organization has cautioned that Afghanistan could slip into famine this year. Similarly, according to the UN Development Programme, nearly every Afghan citizen could be living in poverty by mid-2022. The United Nations chief warned that millions of Afghans are on the verge of death, urging the international community to fund the UN's $5 billion humanitarian appeals, release Afghanistan's frozen assets, and restart its banking system to avert economic and social collapse. Marking another step forward, Martin Griffiths, the UN's humanitarian chief, and Peter Maurer, president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, to hold a virtual meeting on Friday with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. One of the goals of the virtual meetings is to develop mechanisms that allow for the effective injection of cash into the Afghan economy while also creating the circumstances for the Afghan financial sector to operate in the local currency. The disintegrating Afghan economy has relentlessly raised the horrendous specter of the deadliest humanitarian crisis, with far more remaining to be done.
Rana, Ather, Javed, Director General, Pakistan House, joins us online. Rana Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us. Rana Sahab, everybody knows the situation through which Afghanistan is going through, the Afghan people are going through. The pledges have been made time and again. Pakistan has been asking the world to help Afghanistan before it's too late. Antonio Guterres again has reiterated that the countries around the world need to donate these $5 billion, almost $5 billion, in order to help the Afghan people. How long is it going to take before the world realizes and actually sends this money so that it reaches the people?
Well, thank you very much, Omar. I think it's been consistent from the Pakistani side, but it's also been inconsistent from the other parties, stakeholders. The United Nations has, of course, come very hard this time, and it has been since the crisis started. And we all have to understand it is going through the harsh winter, but at the same time, the realization is not there as yet that when the banking system is not being allowed actually, and the money is not being even sent through international donors, how can any government, let alone the Taliban government at the moment, can really help their own people? I mean, this Afghanistan has been on the UN and other aids for the past all these more than 4 decades. And what is new right now? They should not have actually suspended, first of all. But if they have done it because they wanted things to be settled down, everyone knows that the things are much, much better security-wise. And we all also understand, we have to understand that if this continues, the only beneficiary in all these are syndicate of international terrorist organization and those regional and other actors who do not want peace, stability in South Asia. That subsequently can affect actually reputation of United States and the NATO member state, who in all good faith withdrew in order to bring back peace there. So I think it is absolutely urgent, as they call it. It's a red alert should be there, and they must release at least amount in phases. If they can't release $5 billion immediately, they can do it in 3-4 phases, but immediately. There is a dire need, and the humanitarian catastrophe combined with administration, with all those, when people say in the Western countries, they're not looking at the softly down towards Afghan society, because the issue is not only, whereas we say the rights of the woman should be there and all these things, we understand that. That's okay. But
Afghanistan needs to stand on its own 2 feet before it can move towards those measures. Rana Sahab, Antonio Guterres also pleads with the United States and the World Bank to unfreeze Afghanistan's funds. We know the $9.5 billion that are frozen as we speak by the United States, and there are other funds that are also frozen. Despite the fact that US has also pledged money of late, it has pledged $308 million to help the Afghan people. Nevertheless, how important is it for also US to kind of at least reverse this freezing of the Afghan assets, at least temporarily, at least give a chunk of it so that the Afghan people can stand on their own feet, the Afghan government can start moving its machinery in the proper way, so that then they can move towards those demands that they have been making to Afghanistan?
I totally agree with you on that one. I mean, the issue here is that they have conditioned that defreezing that amount with the recognition of international recognition of a Taliban government, number one. Number two, they have also, I don't know why they have linked this to the other factors when they had, as we really know now, that they have agreed with Taliban on certain conditions, but we never know the details of it because the details have not been released from the United States side. It was indicated that if we see the situation improves on the ground security situation, US will think about it. But they have not clearly mentioned why they are not releasing, as you said, the partial amount of that. So
at least a partial amount. Everybody knows the situation through which the Afghan people are going through. There's another point that I'd like to ask your opinion on. The mechanism of the money reaching the Afghan people eventually, when and if the money is released by the different countries and of course through the United Nations reaches Afghanistan. Now Taliban are seeking a greater role in this distribution of the Afghan foreign aid. They have proposed a joint body of its officials and the international representatives to coordinate the billions of dollars which are in planned aid. At the same time, the West is very wary of involving the Afghan Taliban government for the distribution of this aid. Isn't this going to lead to a certain, maybe more extension of time before the money actually reaches or the aid actually reaches the Afghan people?
Well, this is the second question which in a row you asked, very relevant. I mean, but I will give my opinion and assessment on that. Number one, we should understand that any further delay could create two problems. One problem is reputation of the Taliban government, that they are unable to manage on the ground, the humanitarian and the administrative apparatuses, because people have to be paid. People have not been paid for so many months and people are coming to work as well. Number two, which is really important for international community to understand, it is not about the Taliban government only. It is not about their legitimacy. It is about the international peace and stability, which the US and NATO promised that they will support and complement once they withdraw. So violation of that promise lies on the US and other players. So we should also, I think, continuously emphasize on one important factor, that is there are maybe powers or there are actors, I don't know, but there must be some players in the region or others that they want Taliban to fail. And that failure is not on Taliban. This failure is on, actually at this time until today, is on those who do not want to provide the legitimate resources, financial, to the Taliban government simply because they cannot wash them away after 2 decades. Look, the previous government, everyone is documented properly from Western sources that they were really corrupt and they were using that aid money for their personal gains. Some ran with the money, but the current government, if they are proposing joint mechanism and auditable, aid distribution mechanism, that is by far is one of the best solutions if there are fears among international donors. But the problem would, I think it's my opinion, again, it's my assessment, that the problem is not that they don't want to release maybe. They want to delay it. I do not know what can be the reasons behind it. But one implication which will directly affect the reputation of the United States and NATO member relates to their own image as a withdrawing force which has promised to complement Taliban efforts. This is my assessment, Taliban efforts to stabilize Afghanistan and less violence should take place. Well, what about Daesh and all other actors which are watching this very carefully? And they must be thinking
trying to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, they can exploit the situation, and they are trying to exploit the situation to create more social chaos. Well, these millions of children, those UNICEF and United Nations and all those claims should be protected. The money should come immediately. That's absolutely the bottom line. And that bottom line doesn't need any logic or rationale for this moment. Taliban are ready to become part of that, is my assessment again, which is coming from the open source information. The reports are coming. And I wonder the UN Secretary General could not have said more clearly than he said now. Before that, there were panel of different health organizations which are worried about that there would be deaths of children and ordinary people. You see, 34 provinces of Afghanistan cannot be handled by international organization. The money has to go through accountable channel through the Taliban government. That's the solution. And to get to that, they must allow and remove those sanctions on the Taliban's banking system and the banking system of Afghanistan, and then create a mechanism. It's not, I mean, the UN has done this forever in the conflict zones, and Afghanistan is no conflict zone right now because of the US and other countries' commitment when they withdrew from there, that it is the responsibility of the Taliban law and order. Well, law and order cannot come without a cost. A smallest country in a smallest city cannot be operated if there are no salaries paid to the people, policemen, or agencies, other agencies.
Now Rana Sahab, United Nations Humanitarian Chief Martin Griffiths and Peter Maurer, President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, are to hold a virtual meeting today with the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken as well. Do you feel they will be able to convince the United States of the importance of A, unfreezing the assets, B, sending the money at the earliest, and C, channelizing that money and aid with the cooperation of the Afghan Taliban?
Well, I to be honest, I'm pessimistic about them releasing all these some parts of the $9 billion which they owe to Afghanistan. This was the fund which was actually agreed. But the second point is that they agreed on to pay some $300 million, $325 million, I do not know the exact amount, but something like that through the international donor agencies, especially the United Nations or other agencies they may agree to. Look, they still have some people, some contractors or others, advisors involved with in Afghanistan. It is not a difficult job for them to do it. I think it was a difficult job for them to even trace. It was very complex that they couldn't trace the corruption of that previous government. But it is here very easy for them to give money through the United Nations. Let that thing happen now, from tomorrow or from today. Not in thinking more process can cost more lives, and that can create a reputational issue for Taliban. To my assessment is this, that it is absolutely pertinent for the world community, but also United Nations. And Pakistan has done a remarkable job by pushing it as much as it could have. I mean, it is now responsibility of United Kingdom.
Conference as well of the OIC. Just on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from evacuation process till today, from OIC conference until the commitment from Pakistani side, which is itself face different economic issues, but still we are willing to help our Afghan neighbors and Afghan brothers, sisters, because we consider that Afghan's peace also hinges on the regional stability. And this is not, as I said, a complex formula to understand. So we must at least push this forward. And we hope that from today's virtual meeting between these International Red Cross and the United Nations representative with the Secretary of State,
Anthony Blinken, yes.
Any of the US, something should come out, and those commitment pledges which are made even during OIC should also be channelized, because there is one thing you make a commitment, but it's an important thing that in a dire situation, in an urgency, that fund should be released. That's what I think is important.
All right. Last question, Rana Saab. if I were to ask you, looking at the dire straits in which the 8.7 million Afghans that Antonio Guterres cites as who are on the brink of starvation, and that it was very important, as he said, to inject liquidity into the Afghan market in order to make Afghanistan stand on its feet and give these people the required aid, the food, and also he also talked about the Afghans who are on the verge of death. Do you feel that the world has understood, recognized the plight, or do you feel this is more or less a political move, or maybe some kind of another maneuver for them, just like any other country that they feel, until and unless it doesn't happen in their own backyard, they will not understand the importance of it? What's your take on that? I'd like a very short answer on that, sir.
I think second is very plausible. They have politicized it too much. And if had it happened in South Sudan, they were there in East Timor, they were there anywhere in other part of the world. They do go there, and this is a double standard. And I think we should not hesitate to point out that this should not have happened in this country, in Afghanistan, where 27 member states of the United Nations, of NATO, had been there for 20 years. They understand the complex situation. I think my answer would be that we do fear that kind of politicization is in play, and Pakistan and all other countries who are well-wishers of Afghans, especially those in the Western and European Union, must protect the region from boiling this thing out of hand.
Thank you very much, Rana, Ather, Javed, Sub-Director General, Pakistan House, to have joined us and to have talked to us about the dire straits in which Afghanistan is currently present, and of course the situation that has been highlighted time and again by Pakistan and time and again by the United Nations of late, Antonio Guterres, who talks about the 8.7 million Afghans who are on the brink of starvation and the other loads and hordes of Afghans who are on the verge of death as well. I really hope that the world reacts and understands the plight of people, if not on any other ground, then on a humanitarian ground, and send this aid to Afghanistan at the earliest. The rest of the modalities can be, of course, thwarted with the time, but for the moment what is extremely important is that the people, the women, the children, the men get their food, get their aid at the earliest, so that at least they can survive this harsh winter. Let's come to our last three stories very quickly, ladies and gentlemen. The first is about Syria, that has joined the China proposed Belt and Road Initiative. On Wednesday, Syria became part of this BRI, of which China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is also a very important aspect, and Pakistan is part of that as well. This ceremony took place during the signing of an MOU at the Planning and International Cooperation Commission in Damascus, that is the Syrian capital. It was undertaken by Fadi Khalil, head of the commission, and the Chinese ambassador Feng Biao, both of which were quite optimistic of the future of the relationship between Syria and China in the context of the BRI. Of course, BRI is an extremely important project proposed by China in 2013, which comprises the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, and aims to build a trade, investment and infrastructure network connecting Asia and other parts of the world. Next, we have Prince Andrew, who has now lost his military titles and the use of His Royal Highness. Why? Because a couple of years back, it is alleged that he raped a woman not once but multiple times, and that woman now has come to the forefront and has alleged that Prince Andrew raped her through, of course, the allegiance of certain mutual friends, and that is why there is going to be a huge citation and a huge case against Prince Andrew. He will lose many titles that includes Honorary Air Commodore of RAF Lois Smooth, Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Irish Regiment, Colonel-in-Chief of the Small Arms School Corps, Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Lancers, Colonel-in-Chief of the Yorkshire Regiment, Royal Colonel of the Royal Highland Forces, and so many others. Let's come to our last segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the report that has been released by the Human Rights Watch. This is known as its World Report 2022. In this World Report, it has criticized many different countries, whether it be those who are increasingly repressive and violent against the civilian protests by autocratic leaders and military regimes across the world, which of course the report says is a sign of their desperation and weakening grip on power. It also criticizes countries such as the United States. It also criticizes countries such as Germany. It also criticizes countries such as India for the way it has been treating its minorities. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll be back inshallah on Monday. Have a great weekend. Follow the SOPs. Get yourselves vaccinated. Allah Hafiz.